Okay, so I'm going to talk about now SI and TI coming together for a type. So the idea here is that I've already covered NE and FE and NI and FI. So now I want to cover SI and TI. So the types which are involved in this is going to be the intj and the isfp. Now, as I've said before in my previous video, I swapped the P and the J for the introverted types because it doesn't make sense for introverts to have their P or J quality decided by whichever function happens to be rational and extroverted in their top two. Because why the top two? Why is that so important? Why is that so special compared to all the others? Why top two? I mean, so basically you're saying that the dominant function is no longer important. It is the auxiliary function which is deciding things. That makes no sense. The whole point of the auxiliary function is to support and help the dominant function. It shouldn't be drawing attention to itself. So I don't subscribe to that view. I think it's a very incorrect view, and actually I think it comes from a misunderstanding of extroverted and its what people think is its externality, and that shows up, but suddenly the introverted one doesn't show up so much. So types are only J-ish if they are extroverting their rational side. I don't believe that. This idea of extroverting your rational side is meaningless to me. By extroverting rationality, that just means you're collecting more and more and more shoulds. It doesn't mean that you are showing up your shoulds more in the world in which you interact with others. So if you're TI leading, you're going to be uncompromising in that TI, right? And it doesn't mean that you have to be TE to be uncompromising in your thinking. TI can be uncompromising too if it's in the dominant function. And so these types will be very TI oriented, and they will, in their theoretical zone, create very clear structures and be particular in terms of how things fit together. If you take TI and SC, they're going to actually try to push and enforce that structure. If that's not what the people call extroverting judging, I don't know what else is. So yeah, I'd reject the premise. So I'd describe this as INTJ, TINE, and ISFP, SIFE. And both these types, they both push SI and TI because that's the leading or dominant function and the tertiary, the mobilizing function that's being talked about. So what does that look like? So I said that when it comes to different cognitive functions being presented as a theme, they are competing over a certain virtue. And I talked about the virtue of decency, how NEFE was more about affirming the decency of things, being optimistic, saying yes, and the NI and FI types were denying the decency, being skeptical towards people and things and saying no to things unless they are really convinced it should be a yes. So now let's talk about SI and TI and what that is, what virtue that's talking about. So that's talking about the virtue of achievement, you could say. And the idea is that these types are going to be denying the virtue of achievement. The idea is that there is a desire to preserve harmony and structure, the way things are done, keeping it coherent, consistent, smoothly and elegantly worked together to the point where we're used to doing it this way. This is how it's done. This is the right, elegant, comfortable way of doing it. We don't want to have to shake things up. We don't want disruptions. Disruptions are going to throw us off. They are going to be stressful. They're going to be unpleasant. We don't want them. We don't want these disruptions and these sudden reworkings of everything because you say it's more efficient. That's going to really make us uncomfortable in our space. We have put together our system, it makes sense, we like to think about it, it's very elegantly and very beautifully put together, it's just perfect for me in what I want to do and the things I like to do with my friends. I don't want you guys coming in there and telling us we're going to have to drop it all and have to take on this whole different system because that is going to be more effective. that is a lot of stress. That is a lot of we feel like you are forcing and pressuring us into doing that, and that's not very comfortable either. Our system makes total sense. It all fits together. It makes sense to me. Why do you have to add all this extra data onto my plate? And why do you have to go in here and disrupt the calm and the harmony and basically create all this stress and discomfort in my life? We don't like it. We don't want it. So that's the idea for SI and TI. SI provides that sort of need for a wholesome, harmonized sensory experience, and TI is quite static. It's quite set. So once it creates its framework, its model for understanding things, it's not looking to be constantly updated. That kind of breaks the model, breaks the structure. So even, say, for an INTJ, they're quite begrudging about the idea of having that suddenly switched over just because you've uncovered some new data. So what if the new data has been covered over, which supposedly contradicts what I set out? I know my theory will apply across these different circumstances. What you see is likely to be an anomaly. Why do I have to go to all this hard work of having to rethink it all just because you come up with some new data point? I put a lot of thought into making this thing fit together and make sense. And it's so elegant, it just has to make sense in theory. Why do I have to constantly updating it just because you've done some study? Like, there'll be another study, like a few years from now, which will say the opposite. So why should I break my system and ruin my system just because you come up with this? I don't want to feel pressured to do that right now. I really can't be bothered to do that. So that's the idea for SI and TI, what's being pushed here. It is kind of denying the sort of the restless improvement of achievement. It doesn't like it. It finds that off-putting. These types want to find their comfort zones. They want to find what is pleasant, what is enjoyable, what is elegant, and sort of fits together structurally and in a way which where the principles all align. It's not messy. It's not nasty. It's not inconsistent. Because that's really the thing, right? If you start adding in new facts, it's not that you've got a whole new system in place. No. It's a mess of different facts. It doesn't fit together. It's hard to understand because one part seems to contradict another. It's gone back from a perfected system or model to a sort of messy work in progress of all these pieces that they're going to have to pick up, which is just uncomfortable to have to do. Why should I have to do this? I've got this nice system, and you've sort of mucked it up with all of this. And it's all ugly, and it's all horrible, and it's all just intense and sort of draining to have to deal with. I don't want to have to deal with all of that. That's just not fun anymore, and it's not nice anymore. So that's kind of SI and TI working together in this sort of creating this theme that denies the achievement. It doesn't want that. It wants to keep things harmonious and elegant and structurally integrated rather than broken apart in a sort of opportunistic improvements being made. So yeah, that is the idea for SI and TI as a theme.